Welcome to Fucked Up Fables Spooky Tales! If ruining your childhood is something you enjoy, you've come to the right place. We have a new guest here today, Vi, and she's actually going to be presenting her today's episode. So what are we covering today?
Hi, I'm Vi, and we're going to have a super neat discussion about one of the most popularized creatures in folklore, which is vampires.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I had to, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Hotel
um, so I broke this down. Okay, preface. There are a lot of foreign words in here that I will do my absolute best to pronounce, but I will probably mess some of them up at some point during this presentation. So,
Hard with vampire teeth in.
yeah, especially with I legitimately practiced these words, but I did not practice them with vampire teeth in. So here we are.
It's gonna be fun.
Yeah. So speaking of words, we're going to talk about the origin of the word vampire. So there was a lot of debate initially about where the word vampire came from, but it's now pretty widely accepted that it derives from the Slavic word upir, which is in turn believed to be derived from the Turkish word for witch, which is ubir. And a lot of times, witches and vampires were interchangeable in this time period.
I did not know that. That's interesting.
Yeah. So it's important to note that the idea of specifically vampires is actually relatively recent, and it became most prevalent during in 18th century Eastern Europe. And of course, before that, there was stories of revenants, which are just undead beings that stretch all the way back to prehistoric times. So, yeah, I was gonna say there are dozens of tales of vampiric creatures from a variety of cultures, such as the Mesopotamian Lamashtu, the ancient Greek Striges, the Filipino Manananggal, the Malaysian Penanggalan, and the Australian Yaramayahu, which is one of my favorite ones to pronounce.
I'm sorry, the what?
Yaramayahu. He is a little red dude with a big head and bloodsuckers on his fingers and toes, and he hunts people in the middle of the night and sucks their blood.
So he's like a little red octopus. He just launches.
He looks like the art that I have seen kind of depicts him sort of like a honestly, do you know what the Pokemon Toxicroak looks like? Because he kind of looks like him. It's like a little tree frog type thing, but humanoid. It's like a humanoid tree frog.
Wow.
It's uncomfortable.
Love it.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, and
being chased by this thing. That's what I'm imagining.
Yeah. And even the Caribbean has one, which is called the Sokayant. And the list goes on. There's a ton of different cultures that have some variety of nocturnal blood-sucking creature. All of these creatures are vastly different in appearance. They all have their own folklore, but the important thing that links all of them is that they sustain themselves by consuming the life essence of a living creature.
Question.
Time
Yes.
out.
Is the succubus considered a vampire? Because don't they suck out the life of the people they capture?
So I don't know broad spectrum, honestly. I know that there are a lot of pop culture things that would consider them a vampire. For example, there's an RPG game called Vampire, and there is a type of vampire in there that feeds off of sexual energy. So they are basically succubi, but for terms of this presentation, probably not.
Okay.
So all of the folklore surrounding all of these creatures and stuff, it's really, really cool. I did a little bit of digging into each one, and decided that it was way too much to cover in a single episode. I was like, there's no way. So I decided that we were going to choose one type. So most people believe or assume that the concept of vampires became popularized in Transylvania first because of the lovely Bram Stoker novel Dracula.
I love it.
Yeah, but that is not the case. Most scientists or like anthropologists or archaeologists, what I don't know, whatever you call those people.
Folklore studies. It's like folklore something. I learned this from my upcoming episode.
I was
Totally
gonna say
a
I
field
actually took a
study.
class on folklore, so you'd think I'd know. But
Yeah,
anyway,
basically folklore studies, and I was like,
yes,
I didn't even know this was a thing.
You should have
yeah,
done that in
it
college.
is a thing,
Mhm.
and I should have known it was a thing. But so most scientists believe that the vampire came to Western cultures from the folklore of the Slavic people, particularly that of the Balkan populations. Because the vampire, as we know it today, originated in Eastern Europe, I'm going to focus mostly on Eastern European and Slavic folklore surrounding the vampire.
Yay!
Yeah. So
I
now that
said
we've
that like I know.
established the type of vampire that we're going to talk about, we can get into the good nitty gritty stuff, which is the good bits.
All right then. I'm intrigued.
Yeah. So now that I wanted to take a minute to identify what a vampire is. So, according to Whitney's Century Dictionary, which is one of the largest encyclopedias in the English language, for those who don't know, it says that a vampire is, quote, a kind of spectral body which, according to superstition, existing among the Slavic and other races of the lower Danube, believes leaves the grave during the night and maintains a semblance of life by sucking the warm blood of living men and women while they are asleep. Dead wizards, werewolves, heretics, and other outcasts become vampires. As so, also the illegitimate offspring of parents who are themselves illegitimate, and anyone killed by a vampire.
That's like some seventh son of the seventh son.
Ooh,
Right.
that the seventh son of a seventh son is in the Darkest Rising saga.
It's actually there is a series called The Seventh Son. They made a book about it, but that's actually
There's also a movie called The Seventh Son.
yeah, it's based on a book series, but it's actually a part of mysticism in American culture back in the 1800s. Fun fact.
Interesting. The seventh son of a seventh son in the Darkest Rising saga is like the prophesied one for this particular kind of power thing.
Yeah, in mysticism too. It is if you are the seventh son of the seventh son, it is considered that like you are the like strongest mysticist, whatever they called themselves. I don't remember the term. I've deep
I
dove into some
I-
weird shit, learning about the Salem witch trials, and mysticism was one of those.
No, I'm just kind of wondering if this is where the author maybe got inspired by.
Maybe.
Because he like joins an order of some sort that's supposed to help keep the balance between the light and the dark, and good and evil, light and dark, and that's what it's all about, is trying to maintain order, because Christopher Eccleston is the dark in the movie, at least.
That's not what mysticism is. Mysticism was them having these weird witchy superstitions, but also wanting to be Puritans at the same time, and they made this amalgamation called mysticism.
Interesting.
That is weird.
It's weird.
Good news,
Anyway.
though. If you are just illegitimate offspring, you're fine. So long as your parents are legitimate. But
So that just means like unmarried, right? That's what they mean by illegitimate.
yeah, or like, you are married but you had a kid with somebody else, or
Back then, they would be called bastards.
yeah.
Yeah.
They're still usually called bastards today.
Are they really? I didn't think we used that word to describe, because we don't really call people legitimate or illegitimate children anymore.
Yeah, there's not really.
I mean, when you refer to someone as a bastard, that's typically what you.
Right, that's what I'm like,
I call people bastards because they're being dicks.
I mean, that too, but also Game of Thrones just like ended only a couple years ago, and that was a big deal in Game of Thrones. So.
That's very true. Poor Jon Snow. Bad contract.
So I did cite another source, and that is the Encyclopedia Britannica, who also identifies a vampire as the person who turns vampires are generally wizards, suicides, and those who come to a violent end or have been cursed by
Ooh,
their parents or by the church. But
suicide.
anyone may become a vampire if an animal, especially a cat, leaps over the corpse or a bird flies over it.
There are birds that fly over corpses all the time, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
I
called
mean,
bunkers.
probably, but it's like specifically if a bird flies over a dead body before it has had funeral rites done. Yeah.
Weird.
Interesting. I'm assuming it's the same thing with the cat before it's.
What's wrong with cats, people? Why are they evil?
Nothing is inherently wrong with cats.
They're just
But
Hannah's very in tune with the other world.
Fun side note, it was never the black cat that was unlucky. It was the white cat. Somewhere along the road, those stories got crossed. But originally, white cats were unlucky if they crossed your path, and a black cat was considered lucky.
That makes sense, actually.
it's
I think
kind of
because
weird.
white cats are super, like, they're not super rare, but, like, you typically don't see an all white cat. It's not super
That's
common.
fair. So it is believed that vampires originated from stories of revenants, which are really just anything that is considered like a risen dead. So descriptions of their physical appearance vary, but there were a few details that I found that seemed that most agreed on, or that various retellings all shared these traits. Vampires are often described as having bloated stomachs with red, blue, or a purpley hued skin. They're often described as wearing white linen. They would have protruding teeth or fangs, long claw-like fingernails, and overgrown hair.
That's
Do I
not.
look like one yet?
You don't have a bloated stomach. That's not what
I
I
know
am.
why. I know why they're described like that, though.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So there's actually like scientific reasoning for literally each of these characteristics. So often this is a little terrifying, but often people were actually buried alive, not intentionally, but
I
their
thought that was
methods
just a myth.
for discerning whether or not somebody was actually dead or not were really bad, obviously.
Yeah.
So a lot of times they would be buried, and then when they were dug up later to determine whether or not they were vampires, they weren't in the proper state of decay because they were buried alive. So they were alive for a little while before they died. There's also a lot of like soils and things like that could affect how fast a body decayed. Um, so it's also important that when a heart stops beating, the blood pools to the dependent parts of the body, which can create that bluish or purpley look because it essentially will cause like an entire area of the skin to look bruised.
So I learned this while listening to all of my murder podcasts. I forget what they call it, but it's whatever the part of your body that is like closest to the ground. So like if you're laying on your side, it all pools on the side of your body. If you're on your back, it all pools on the back.
Mhm.
So that's why
Yeah.
sometimes that's how they can like determine if someone's been moved after they've been killed or not.
Yeah.
So I did learn that, which is interesting.
Yeah.
I never
That's
thought of
yeah,
that.
that's what I mean when I say that like it pools in the dependent parts of the body because it pools in whatever part of the body is dependent to the rest of it. So like
And fun side note, getting buried alive was actually so common at one point in time that they changed their death practices to do things like leaving the body for 3 days before you bury it and then having a death bell.
yeah.
That's where the thing when the bell tolls comes from too. Because there'd be a bell attached to a string that went down to the casket that if somebody woke up in the casket, they could pull on it and someone would hear the bell ring.
Yeah.
I
The only
literally
problem
thought that was
is
a myth.
I was gonna say the only problem is that a lot of times people were like too sick to actually like move.
Yeah.
So they
But
couldn't pull the bell.
it influenced our death practices today. We don't bury people for 3 days. No longer because we're afraid they're alive, but that's why we do it or why we did in the first place.
Yeah. I don't like it. I don't want to be buried
That's all I
alive.
need to know. You don't like what?
I said I don't like it. I don't want to be buried alive.
I don't
You
think
should
anyone wants to.
you should watch the YouTube channel Ask a Mortician.
I love
Is
them.
what do they call it? Death advocate or something like that, where they try to make death more of an everyday thing. And she talks about like natural burial and stuff, and she
That's
explains
really
how you
cool.
won't be buried alive too. I watched that one today.
So Daddy didn't answer is what you're saying? Yeah. Okay, that's fine. If he answers, I will let you know. Okay.
But good YouTube channel, Ask a Mortician.
Really
cool.
I'll just check it out because it sounds exactly like something I would watch.
Death positive. I think that's what she calls it.
One of the how I came into them was they were talking about how you put makeup on a dead body. Because that's one of the things they address, because everyone's like, how do you do this? And I'm like, things I never thought I wanted to know, but now I'm interested.
Oh, she has, is that the episode? It's the Ask a Mortician you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Is that the episode where they show what a body looks like before they put makeup on it? They didn't do it on a real body. They did the makeup on her.
Yeah.
To make her look like what you would look like dead, and then they had them go in with the makeup to correct.
Yeah, and part
of that was like because blood was pooling in places.
Yeah, it's kind of like the opposite side of the scale from like drag makeup. So it's like really over the top makeup that you have to do, but it's not because you're like doing drag. It's because you literally look different when you're dead, and so they have to like make you
like jaundice and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, and like your like face sinks in, so they have to like add stuff to it to make it look normal. And I'm like, this is so creepy, but I love it.
Welcome to my life. I have literally put a body in a body bag before on more than one occasion.
That's terrifying.
I'm scarred. Like, this is my fear of zombies, I think, comes from because I grew up across from a funeral home.
Right.
And I've seen plenty of bodies in body bags, but I haven't seen the bodies. But like as a young child, when you see the body bags being unloaded from the ambulance and into the funeral home, and then your 6th grade class decides to take a field trip, and I got to see like everything in there, picked out my own casket and everything. It was pink.
Please go.
Yeah, and that's where my fear of zombies comes from. I couldn't do your job, bye. Nope, too terrified of dead people because of that.
It's not. I mean, I very rarely do. I dealt with them a lot more when I worked in the emergency department, so I very, very rarely have to deal with dead things now, which is nice.
Yeah, was it freshly dead things or like?
Typically, yes. I did actually before I graduated nursing school and I was working as a phlebotomist. They had to draw blood from a body for like forensic reasons because it was involved in like a criminal case. So that was really neat because I got to draw blood from a dead body. Turns out it's real hard.
I believe it.
So this is why I didn't become a plastic surgeon like I originally wanted to. I had to practice on dead bodies.
That's true. I have done cadaver things in school.
I didn't become a medical examiner because school is for chumps, and I decided not to go to college.
Who's the real winner here? I think it's you. I think you're the real winner here.
Yeah, I have way too much schooling, and I feel cheated.
Yeah, I said no thanks. I don't need the stress or debt, or I can learn all this stuff on my own outside of. I don't need this piece of paper. It's fine. Look at me now.
Yeah, I'm with you. But decaying bodies. So when a body starts to decay, this is like post rigor mortis phase. So when they start to decay, one of the first things that happens is the skin dehydrates. And when the skin dehydrates, it causes the appearance of longer hair, longer nails, and longer teeth. Which is one of the main signs that somebody was a vampire. And then bacteria in the stomach will create a gas that fills the belly, which then makes it appear very bloated, and the expansion of the stomach from this gas will cause, or not always, but sometimes it will cause, um, like blood and other matter to come out of the mouth, because it doesn't have anywhere else to expand to. And so then it will look as if they have like freshly drank blood because there's blood and matter coming out of their mouth. This gas is also the reason that a lot of people claimed that they heard like a scream or like a cry when they staked the body. Because when you adjust the body, it will escape, and it's like the death moan. And after a person has died, you can, if you move them, you can like release that gas from their body, and they will make sounds. Yeah.
No, thank you.
I do know that this is where the like I don't know why they decided let's dig up some bodies of people who have died, but I do know that like they used to when they would see bodies that looked like that, so that have like the blood and stuff, they would take the like brick and shove it in their mouth to keep them from sucking blood again. I mean, if they can climb their way out of a casket, I don't understand what's stopping them from pulling it out, but apparently that's what they did.
Break the jaw.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of interesting folklore regarding like preventing vampires from leaving their coffins. We're going to get into that.
Oh, okay.
One of the reasons why they would dig up bodies is because if there was, say, a strange illness going around and someone had recently died, they would sometimes think that perhaps a vampire is killing the town.
Yeah. We're also going to get into that.
Oh, sorry. I used to really, really love vampires when I was younger. So I'm just like, I love it.
Yeah, it's good. I like it too. I spent way too much. So I have a friend that I actually got a lot of this information from one of his textbooks because he took an entire class on vampirism.
Nice.
Yeah, he's a classics and folklore studies major. So like,
shout out.
Yeah. Thanks, Tusker.
Where's his YouTube channel? I want to watch it.
So some of the commonly known abilities and powers of vampires that we know today were not necessarily classic to vampires originally, and actually came from other similar creatures. So there is a creature in Albanian folklore called the Lugat, which is similar to a vampire in that it drinks blood, but it only does so in very small amounts, and it can drink from the same victim for days or even weeks. And it will take a full 30 years for a Lugat to mature. And they're very notorious for liking extremely dark places, which is where they think that the whole vampires are only nocturnal thing comes from. And Lugats can they can shapeshift. So that's most likely where vampires being able to shapeshift arose.
Into bats.
Yeah. There is another story from Romani culture that is similar to the vampire, and it's called the Mulo. Mulo? I can't pronounce it very well. Sorry. But they are undead, and they think that the term for a vampire being undead specifically came from this Romani culture, Mulo. So I thought that was super interesting too, because they never actually initially referred to vampires as being undead. They were the risen dead, or they were alive again, because revenants were risen dead, and that's where vampires initially came from. But the term undead and it being a dead, a Walking Dead creature type thing, that was a Mulo thing. So
vampires are kind of I guess modern day vampires are this amalgamation of all the different Eastern European cultures and stuff. Kind of.
Yeah.
And glitter. Let's not forget glitter.
No.
Thanks, Stephanie Meyer.
No.
And a lot of the classic powers and abilities that vampires have actually came from Bram Stoker. They didn't have any basis in folklore whatsoever.
He was just
the reflection thing, I'm going to get into it, but that's probably because historically in Slavic folklore, vampires were invisible, at least for a portion of their lives.
I thought
So
the vampires didn't have a soul.
yes, so vampires were often used as mythoscapes or scapegoats in folklore.
Okay, I was like, it's a what?
Yeah, they call them mythoscapes, but it's helpful to think of them as an entity of result rather than a distinct creature. So they were born from the need to blame or create explanation when there wasn't one.
Like fairies.
Yeah. So because of the nature of them being blamed, like the existence of a vampire being blamed on something that's happening, their powers and abilities often shifted. So there is no distinct, oh, they were this strong and they caused this disease, because it changed from every telling because it depended on what was happening. Yeah, so there's only a very, very, very few common acceptances among like the all of the vampire stories that I could find. They were invisible for much of the beginning stages of their lives. They were notoriously difficult to kill. They would often work their way through families, usually starting with their own,
Please
or
go.
attacked those that had personally offended them in life.
Go.
Revenge.
Yeah, revenge. They were nocturnal in nature, and they were no longer the entity that they had been in life.
Okay.
So, throughout much of the southern Slavic folklore, it seemed that vampires were invisible incorporeal spirits for the first 40 days of their lives.
No. I don't trust you with my phone. I'll go.
Then after that, they became these weird, like, viscous jelly-like formations, which was they were also invisible. And then finally, after they had sucked enough lifeblood, they would become like real again, and they would form bodies that were nearly identical to the ones that they had had in life.
So how does it suck blood if it's a jelly?
It was so they were basically described as like a body without bones. Yeah, but they were still invisible.
I hate everything about it.
It's pretty terrible, I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, but they were still invisible. So
invisible bodies without bones.
yeah. Which is weird because
slurping your bud.
Oh no.
Yeah. It's bad. It's real bad.
You're welcome. So they're not romantic in the same way that we always think of.
No, that was a very that was like initially popularized by Bram Stoker and then was like continued on, especially with the Anne Rice books.
Oh
yeah.
So
after
do we have to do like a bleep out her name so we don't get sued by Anne Rice? Sorry, I'm a bit salty about her.
That is a thing that she does, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, we should probably bleep out her name.
Sorry, not sorry.
We'll call her Ran Ice.
Yeah. It was very popularized by the Ran Nice books.
You know, like one of my favorites, which is sitting down and speaking in front of a recorder with a vampire book.
I was going to say that one movie with Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt and Antonio Banderas that we're not allowed to talk about.
With the best performance of Kirsten Dunst, I think.
Yeah. You know, that movie that had all of them in it. Whatever.
Yeah, Sit Down and Chat with a Vampire. I believe that's the title.
Yeah, yeah. And what was the other one? King of the Underworld?
Oh, yeah.
It was a terrible movie. I love it though.
So,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, after they had sucked enough lifeblood, they would become like quote real again, and they would form bodies that were nearly identical to the ones that they had had in life. They would then use this body to harass those that they used to love. They
Oh,
were.
great. I know what Tom's becoming.
I was gonna say they were particularly fond of fucking their widows, which would then bear a half vampire child.
Never mind. I take back what I said. That's creepy.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
good.
uncomfortable. Good news though. Good news though. If your child was a half vampire, they could then become a vampire hunter. So, but we'll, like I said, we'll get into that later. Um, so there are a few beliefs from folklore that probably influenced some of our modern takes on vampires, but not many because most of them were just kind of invented. Um, for example, a lot of people have the association with vampires and coffins.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in folklore, it is rarely, if ever, mentioned that the contents of the coffin are important in literally any way. They think a lot of this was born from the native earth theory that was popularized by Bram Stoker, because Dracula in the book had to have the dirt from his grave, like in his coffin, because he had to have soil from his native land. Um,
Huh.
yeah, so the it likely spawns from the folkloric belief that vampires must remain in their grave for part of the time. Um, Usually, this is listed as being during the day, um, and with very few exceptions, vampires don't travel. They usually just kind of haunt the areas that they died in. Which is why they have the whole like vampires usually worked their way through their family and then onto the next person that had offended them in life, so on and so forth.
Also explains
Um,
like why they would have a layer and just like stay there, and it's like why would you just stay in one place, if you could travel anywhere.
yeah, right. Um, so yeah, so they wouldn't travel at all, which would mean that they didn't need to bring any dirt with them, which would make the contents of their coffin irrelevant. And in fact, a lot of times people weren't even buried with a coffin,
Yeah, they were just kind of
especially if
running
you were like
away.
a peasant.
Yeah.
Um, so they have established that vampires need to spend some of the time in their grave. The amount of time, though, seemed to vary a lot. Some people, it was every day, and then vampires could come out at night. There was a very large portion of the Southern Slavic community, I don't know what you call it, that believed that vampires only had to remain in their grave on Saturdays. There is a lot. They were very fixated on Saturday. I'm just throwing that
I
out there.
wonder if it's a religious thing.
Almost certainly. Um, so because a vampire only had to remain in its grave on a Saturday became the best day to kill a vampire. So in the Serbo-Croatia area of the Balkans, they shared the belief that Saturdays were the days that vampires would return to their grave. So it was often believed that those born on Saturday had the ability to see and kill vampires, but only on a Saturday.
Well,
Hmm.
Uh,
I'm screwed.
Yeah, me too.
um,
I'm a Thursday child.
Tuesday.
I
Nothing happens on Tuesdays.
tacos happen on Tuesdays. Excuse you.
Does that mean I have the ability to foresee tacos?
Yes.
All I get is throwbacks. Throwback Thursday. That's what I'm stuck with.
I
I
don't
need
even
a
know what
taco
day I was born
superpower.
on.
Really? You don't know the only reason I know is because that stupid nursery rhyme.
I looked once. Like when you have to put in your birth date on one of those calendars, I
Yeah.
just looked. I was like, oh, I was born on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never actually done that. I should do that.
Maybe
You
you can
should
do
do
that
that.
after this episode.
Yeah, it was like
Maybe
I'm
we're
totally gonna-
Saturday.
Maybe I am a Saturday. Maybe. Well, I'll let you guys
Drawn
know
to
next week.
vampires for a reason.
So, if you were born on a Saturday, you could see and kill a vampire, but only on a Saturday, which was coincidentally the only day that a vampire couldn't do anything to you because they were stuck in their grave. So, the largest struggle that they faced was determining where the grave was.
Well, if
Yeah.
you know who the vampire is, wouldn't you know where you buried them?
Presumably. But a lot of times they didn't have solid evidence that this is the vampire. They just knew that there was a vampire.
Well, if your husband came back and fucked you and you had a vampire baby, I think you know who the vampire is. Just saying.
So,
They also didn't
bringing
have,
up the vampire fucking babies.
No,
Crazy.
not vampire fucking babies. That's bad.
No, like vampire fucking
Trigger warning,
creating
pedophilia.
babies. Those that could hunt vampires were born on a Saturday, or had a vampiric father, or in the case of a specific Romani tribe, they were twins, a boy and a girl, born on a Saturday who wore their clothes inside out. It's very specific. But you had to be a twin and you had to wear your clothes inside out on a Saturday.
And that means you're a vampire hunter or a vampire baby?
It means you're a vampire hunter. There wasn't really any, not that I could find any solid evidence to determine who was a vampire baby, other than the fact that they also frequently did not have bones.
So, I feel like we need to back up.
I got a question, but I don't think it's relevant now.
I have a question that. Okay, so could only men be vampires?
Or vampire hunters.
Well, because
No,
you said
so
specifically men who come back and like impregnate their like a widow. So
women could be vampires, but a vampire woman could not have a child. So you
Okay.
could only be a half vampire if your father was a vampire.
okay,
Yeah.
important information I need to know.
That is explained in the Anita Blake vampire hunter novels. Why a female vampire cannot get pregnant.
Are we allowed to say her
Spoiler
name?
alert, she's dead. That's why. Body is dead.
Yeah.
Can't go live.
That seems the general consensus in most vampire tales. So, yeah.
Are we okay to say Anita Blake's name though? Like, is she? Race?
I don't know. The author's from St. Louis. She should be like, yeah, they're St. Louis people.
She should be like that. But
I'm just saying, we're supposed to stick together. Isn't that what y'all city folk do? Like,
I'm from the city, so I don't know. We've been over this.
It's true. But Ben, you're from the city.
I'm not from the city.
A city.
I am from a city, I was going to say, but everybody in Chicago is an asshole, so I don't know.
That explains half my family.
Yeah. It's unfortunate, but most people from the Chicago area are, in fact, dicks.
All right, never mind.
So vampire hunting. I don't know why they had such a fascination with Saturdays. I couldn't find any solid evidence that would support why they had such a
Would that be
fascination
the Sabbath
with
day?
Saturdays.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Because I don't remember if it's Christians or Jews, but one of them changed their Sabbath day. That's why Jews are on Saturday, Christians are on Sunday, and that's something to do with them conflicting about the times that they worshipped.
Yeah, I don't know, and I couldn't find anything specific to say like this is why it was Saturday.
I think it was the Jews that moved their day to Saturday rather than the Christians that moved it to Sunday. That seems like something Christians would force Jewish people to do.
We haven't had a standard 7-day calendar until Rome, kind of, and then it was restructured and redone for the Gregorian calendar.
Right.
So
we're talking 18...
Saturday could be Sunday back then. We don't I guess we don't really know.
We're also talking
I
like
mean, they
1700.
probably know, they being the ambiguous scientists that were
Yeah.
aforementioned.
Or people who know the history of calendars.
Right, but we do not know. But anyway, they love Saturday. Saturday was a good day to kill a vampire. Ways to kill a vampire, though,
Ooh.
varied greatly. There was some common themes. Staking them to their coffin was a really common one, but that wasn't actually to kill the vampire in most scenarios. That was to keep them from getting out of their coffin again. If you wanted to like actually kill a vampire, usually it involved like the complete and utter destruction of the body.
Just burn them.
Yeah, they were decapitated and then burned.
Oh.
But if you were going to stake a vampire, the stake that was used varied depending on location. In some places it was wood, usually an ash wood. And then in other places it was iron. There's actually a story, a short story that was written about a vampire having an allergy to Ottoman iron. So like they were just like, oh look, this vampire's. I'm sure it had nothing to do that they were cutting them up. It was entirely the fact that it was an allergy to the iron. But you know,
Wasn't there something about decapitation and burying at a crossroads?
I did vaguely read something about that, but I only saw it in one place, so I didn't like go into it a whole lot because it wasn't one of the things that seemed consistent among all of the sources that I found. So.
And I read one where they used to take the heart out and burn it and feed it to the sick family.
I never read that one.
When you thought that, like, you know, like you said, the vampire would attack the family first. A lot of times it's like an illness going through the family, and it just happened to take the first one, and that's when they think it's a vampire.
Yeah.
You would dig them up, cut out the heart, burn it, mix the ashes in the food, and you fed it to the sick.
Huh. Interesting.
That might actually be early U.S.
That's fucking disgusting.
It is really gross. Oh, just wait. I have some gross shit for you.
Oh,
anyway. But instead, at first, we're going to, well, I guess this little bit is kind of gross. So staking a vampire, usually they would drive the stake into the chest, into the chest, through the heart, and then like out the back of the body, because they were trying to stake it to the bottom of the coffin. So it was very important that the stake went like all the way through.
How stinky would this be?
Probably
disgusting.
Very, yeah. Then it was also super important that you left the stake there. If you took the stake out, then the vampire would just get back out of the coffin. So you had to.
With a big old hole in its chest?
Yeah, because the staking wasn't actually to kill the vampire.
It just kept them in there.
Yeah, I was going to say it was to keep them in the coffin.
Here, I thought I was prepared.
Your cross will work just fine.
I'm not wearing it.
There's actually little to no evidence to suggest that folkloric vampires have any reaction to a cross whatsoever.
I can't be your god charm for this. I'm sorry.
Damn.
Sorry.
So if the host doesn't take me, it's going to be vampires. Okay. What's going to happen? My vote's for the host. I'm just saying. We should start a poll. Which one should it be? The host or vampires?
Personal preference?
She wants the
host. Which is really fucked up because they are... yeah.
You're not supposed to want to be a part of them.
I don't know. They just sound dope as hell. I can't help it.
Yeah. Okay. The whole torturing things forever. Sure.
Whatever makes her happy.
Whatever floats your boat.
Yeah. It does float my boat. Take me.
So
we just got your character back in D&D, okay? You stay.
No. Yeah, that's fair.
It was a long, hard fight there.
So keeping a vampire in its coffin, if you did not want to stake it, or you could not stake it, or you lived in a different part of the Slavic nations, you could wrap a garland of roses around the coffin, and that would keep them in. And if you were a little bit further north, it was a garland of garlic cloves that would
Sounds
keep them in.
delicious.
Yeah. The only ways to like truly destroy a vampire in most places were decapitation or fire or both. But the methods of like how to handle a vampire varied greatly based off of region and the sequence of events that led to the death of the accused vampire. So sometimes, like, depending on how that person had died, depended on how you dealt with them being a vampire. There was also some really cool ways to like find the vampire that I read about. One of them was you would take a horse through the graveyard because a horse would not walk over the grave of a vampire. Usually it was any animal, but like a horse in particular. And in some places it was specifically a white horse, and in some places it was specifically a brown horse.
Shadow facts.
Yeah, but nobody gives a shit about brown horses. It was only white or only black.
What's the horse?
So-
What color was the horse in the Neverending Story? Was he a white horse?
He
Yeah,
was a
Atreyu?
white horse.
Yeah.
He was a pink, wasn't he? Or was he straight white?
I don't remember.
You know what I
Atreyu!
remember about it?
No!
That it was a
He
fucking
was
terrifying
Atreyu.
movie. That's all I remember about the Neverending Story.
That scene was devastating.
Yeah. It was a terrifying movie. The girl freaked me the fuck out. She looked like an alien. That's all.
The Empress.
Yeah.
I honestly don't remember. It's been so long since I've seen it.
Yeah, the
We
child
watch
empress.
it every once in a while. I like it, but I can't stand the Atreyu scene because.
It's so
Bad.
bad.
Anyway,
Yeah.
no.
So vampires.
And I don't think so. Why roses, I guess.
I honestly don't know.
Oh, okay.
I think probably because it was one of the few flowers that you could find like garlands of.
Oh, where?
And they had thorns.
Let's say, what country was this again?
So it was
Northern
like the
Slavic area?
Slavic nations, yeah, which is like
I can give you a
Romania.
breakdown.
There, I think the rose in some Slavic nations is like their flower. I know Bulgaria, the rose is, I guess, their main flower.
The country flower, yeah.
Yeah, I have a really good friend that's from Bulgaria, and like Bulgarian rose oil and all these other rose things is super important there. And she's the one that said this, so I bet it's because of the region. Like in Turkey, it's the tulip. I'm betting wherever this is from is the rose is their flower.
I was gonna say, so Bulgaria and Turkey would fall into it, like Hungary and that sort of area would all fall into like Slavic.
There you go.
Romania.
Russia, Belarus, Macedonia, Czech, Slovenia, Slovakia. I did a lot of research for him for my episode.
Yeah.
Fun fact.
So vampires. So one thing that I thought would be kind of interesting or cool to do, as we're talking about vampires, would be to talk about two of the most famous vampires, like real life vampires in history.
Oh, so not Dracula. Okay.
Well, not
We have to say real life vampire in quotes, right? 'Cause they weren't really vampires.
Yes.
But they were real people.
Yeah, they were real people. So the first one that we're going to talk about is probably the less common of the two, but still very well known. Her name is Elizabeth Bathory. The traditional way to say it would be Elizabeth Bathory, and she is known as the Blood Countess.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about Elizabeth Bathory, the Blood Countess. Elizabeth was born on August 7th of 1560.
Holy
so
shit.
Way before the word vampire was popularized. So it's important to know. Elizabeth was born on August 7th of 1560 to a very prominent and wealthy family in Hungary. She is labeled in the Guinness Book of World Records as the most prolific female murderer of all time.
Alleged. I would just like to point that out.
We're getting into that part, right?
We are, but I'm not gonna lie to you. She seems real guilty. I'm
Yeah,
just throwing it out there.
we'll get into it. I just feel like the alleged part has to be emphasized.
Yes, alleged.
I mean,
It's
she
Female
was
murder
tried
alive.
and convicted, but
So it is there. There is definitely some sketch things about her trial, but we're going to talk about that. Um, and if all of the accounts against her are true, she could potentially be the most prolific killer ever, regardless
yeah.
of gender. Um,
uh,
the accounts of her murders go anywhere from 80 people to 650.
isn't she considered the person to have like have the most kills out of all recorded serial killers?
Yeah.
Probably there is one serial killer that technically had her beat because he self-proclaimed killed over 3,000 people, but there's no like proof of that, and his journal that he had only had 77 names in it. So they're probably like he probably lied about killing 3,000 people.
Interesting.
So, yeah, so I was going to say, but if the accusations against Elizabeth are true, then she would be the most prolific killer ever. And given the time period that she lived in, it kind of explains why, because there's not really anything that they could do to her. But as a child, Elizabeth was exposed to a number of very disturbing and cruel events. And they think that that probably had a fair amount to do with her development and the like cruelty that she was accused of. So she was epileptic. Like that's like hard fact. They know that she was epileptic. At the time they called it the falling sickness. Um, but this is most likely because her parents were actually first cousins. So there's a little bit of inbreeding going on there.
Gotta love that incest. It just pops up at all times, man.
Yeah.
No.
This is what
um,
happened to the Habsburgs.
yeah. So her parents were first cousins, so she was epileptic. And two of the most common practices, gore warning. This is going to get real gross.
I love how you did not put any content warning until you go to say it. And then we're like, wait a
Well,
second.
if you make this far, thank you for joining. And if you gotta tune out, we'll see you next
Yeah,
time.
you just learn about the vampires. You don't learn about Elizabeth because she is fucked. Anyway, so two of the most common practices to treat epilepsy at the time were pretty gruesome. The first was to drain a non-afflicted person's blood and smear it on the lips of somebody who was afflicted. So, it would be very, very common for them to like just bleed blood from somebody that didn't have epilepsy and be like, here's your new lipstick.
That's my lipstick.
Yeah. The second one is even more gross. Similar to the first, it involved taking the blood of somebody who was not afflicted, but they would also take a large piece of their skull and they would grind it up into a liquid mixture, and then they would make them drink it. So
Would that
she, as a
person
child,
survive?
No,
Would
the
that
person's
person
dead.
survive?
no. They would take like somebody that was freshly dead.
Ah,
So Elizabeth, as a child, most likely drank the blood and skull of multiple people. Because you would drink this mixture immediately after one of your episodes ended. So
Huh. You come
yeah.
right out of an episode.
Yeah. It's real gross. Her
delicious.
parents were also known for particularly cruel torture and punishment of those that were beneath them. For example, it is clearly documented that as a young child, she was forced to watch a thief be literally sewn into the stomach of a dying horse.
What the actual fuck?
Yeah.
Was that his punishment or?
Yeah, that was his punishment. He stole. I couldn't figure out what exactly he stole, but he stole. So there's this horse that was dying, and they cut it open, put him inside of it, and stitched up the horse.
Two things. First, really cruel to that horse. And two, did he live?
I don't think so. I don't know. I didn't honestly spend a lot of time looking into what happened to the thief, but I would assume not. I don't think
I
they
wonder
let
what
him
would have
out
killed
of
him.
the stomach of the dying horse.
That.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Yeah.
I have some feelings about this. Oh man.
Right, yeah. So she had a really weird ass childhood that definitely affected her psyche.
I mean, yeah, well, they couldn't do what normal people did to thieves and cut off fingers and hands and shit.
Nope,
Like,
nope, they sewed him into the stomach of dying horses.
I feel like I need to know what he stole. Was it truly just a loaf of bread, or did he like steal someone's wife or some
To
shit?
be
I don't
fair,
know.
I feel like that is an excellent deterrent to not steal something. Like, yeah, you could just lose a hand anywhere else. Being sewn into the stomach of a dying horse seems a little bit worse. Just saying.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. It's
I don't know how effective that was.
so when Elizabeth was 10, she was promised in marriage to a wealthy noble family's son. He was named Ferenc Nadashi. Um,
Fairness?
yes, Ferenc.
Hmm. Okay.
It is rumored, though there is no hard evidence, that at the age of 13, Elizabeth gave birth to an illegitimate child. Yeah,
Scandalous.
yeah, it was given to a common woman that the family trusted and then sent to Wallachia, which is like a different. They were like, just go over there with the illegitimate. Yeah, so they're like, we're never going to talk about this. Um, but the child was born of Elizabeth and a peasant boy, which was even worse because they were like, you don't you don't pay attention to the peasants, let alone sleep with them. So her parents had this peasant boy that Elizabeth loved murdered. Yeah, they just straight killed him.
Wow.
Uh,
I mean, that's how you solve that
allegedly. If
problem, I
we're
guess.
going to use the term allegedly in this, I feel like
A
this should
lot.
also be this
All
should also
preface.
be allegedly. Um but at the ripe old age of 15, she was sent off and married to Dear Ferrets. Her social standing was higher than his, though, so he assumed the last name Bathory. Um, but like his family had more money, but like her family, like her bloodline was older, so they took her last name.
That's actually
Um,
really nice. In other
yeah,
cultures, if a woman marries down, she just loses her status.
yeah. No, there she did a lot of things right in life. I mean, she did a lot of bad, but she did a lot of right. But anyway, so they were married on May 8th of 1575, and there was approximately 4,500 people in attendance.
Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah, the wedding was 3 days long.
Do they just invite the whole fucking country? Like,
I guess. I don't know. There's a lot going on. But as a wedding gift, Ferenc gave Elizabeth his family castle. So his mother had gifted it to Ferenc, and then Ferenc then gifted it to Elizabeth.
get you a
Um,
guy who gives you a castle.
right. So that's where she went to live, and she managed all of their estates. Because in 1578, Ferenc became the chief commander of the Hungarian troops and led the war against the Ottomans.
Mm.
So there was a very small period of time that they were actually together, and then he basically just left. He was like, I'm gonna go fight some Ottomans. You can stay here and take care of all of our estates. So she was set to manage all of their estates and their businesses and everything while her husband was away. Turns out she was super good at this, and he was super good at what he was doing, which was mostly murdering Ottomans. Um, and between the two of them, they very, very quickly amassed a massive sum of money and land. Um, she she owned a third of the country.
Yeah.
Jesus. I knew
Yeah,
she owned a lot. I didn't realize it was that much.
yeah, she owned a third of Hungary, which was actually more than the king at the time. And he was an exceptional warrior. And he became known as like the Black Knight. And yeah, I was gonna say, and there was there.
It's
So
only a flesh wound.
yeah, yeah. Um, so there is some speculation as to whether or not Ference had any influence on her development as a crazy person. Um, some people seem to think that like Ference had no idea that any of this was going on. He was completely ignorant of everything. Other people were like, no, Ference definitely helped because he would come home from war for short periods of time and teach Elizabeth new ways to torture people that he had learned on the battlefield. So 50, it seemed like more people learned or leaned towards him influencing Elizabeth rather than him just being completely ignorant. Um, so, there was some rumors that had started circling about Elizabeth, like, torturing servant girls or people kind of just going missing around the area, things like that. But they were all just rumors. It was really mild, like nothing crazy going on. But Ference got sick in 1601 and it left him disabled. There's not a ton of documentation about it, just that his legs stopped working. And by 1603, he was completely handicapped. His legs didn't work at all. Um, my personal guess is that it was probably some form of like MS or something along those lines.
Oh, I was gonna say like polio or something, maybe.
Yeah, I was gonna say polio or
What is it, Lou Gehrig's disease or something
yeah,
that you can get like much later in life, but it basically just paralyzes you.
right. But it was specifically his legs.
Hmm.
So I don't know. But he died in 1604 at the age of 48. And at this point they had been married 29 years. They had several children together. Um, it is thought that they had a few kids that ended up dying because they weren't written into her will, but they were recorded in other places. But it's not really known.
Okay.
So starting in 1602, so after Ference gets sick, but before he dies, are when the rumors of Elizabeth's like atrocities and like people going missing and things like that start spreading. Um, and it was believed that the Countess, who was always described as having like an unending beauty or an like a suspicious youth, like a lot of people claimed that she just didn't age.
Suspicious youth.
Yeah. Um, she a lot of people started now with the stories that like she's bleeding her victims and bathing in their blood in order to keep her youth and was using witchcraft. Um, and part of the reason that these rumors started is because she employed in her service um, several like known witches. Um, so there is one named uh, Devulia, and she had a huge influence on Elizabeth, especially after Ference died. So they think that a lot of the rumors about her like bathing in the blood to keep her youth and the witchcraft and all of that really sprung from Devulia. Although there are some people that think that Elizabeth's family as a whole were involved in witchcraft and sadism and that she learned it as a little tyke.
Hmm.
That's a little tyke.
Yeah. But with Devulia and then another woman who I'm going to mispronounce this name, but Doriota, they started killing, like torturing and killing dozens of girls, and it was like to the point where like they were running out of fresh meat. Um, Most of these girls were between the ages of 10 and 14. And when she ran out of commoners to kill, they came up with the genius idea to open a sort of school for young women to learn courtly etiquette. They're like, it's
Yeah.
perfect. We'll be flooded with young women that we can torture and murder. Um, so the only problem with that is that the only people that would go to such a school were nobles. Turns out, when you start killing the daughters of nobles, people care.
People take notice, you
Yeah.
know.
So there was any number of excuses that they would use. There was even one excuse where they said that one of the other girls had gone insane and killed several others before they could stop her. Yeah. It was real suspicious. So eventually, at this point, it's like 1610. The church and the king were like, "All right, fine. I guess we should do something because we can't just let her kill nobles. Peasants are fine, but we cannot
God
just let her
forbid.
kill. We cannot just let her kill nobles." So they sent somebody to investigate, and his name was Turzo, and he was the Palatine of Hungary. So he was like the highest ranking official investigator that they had. Um, Problem though, he was best friends with Ferenc when Ferenc was alive. So there's a little bit of a conflict of interest. Yeah, and
Not know
like
that.
on his deathbed, Ferenc was like, "Take care of my children and my widow," and Thurzo was like, "Yeah, I got you," and then he was like, "Awkward." so, in March of 1610, they started collecting witnesses, and by October they had 52 witness statements, and then by the start of 1611, they had over 300. There were two problems. One, they were all peasants, so they could not actually testify in court against a noblewoman. And two, none of them, save for two people, actually saw her commit any crimes.
Yeah, it was all like,
It
I
was all
heard
like,
from
yeah,
someone that, yeah.
yeah. So they had 300 witness statements saying, "Oh yeah, I saw this mutilated corpse," or "I know a guy who heard a scream from the castle at this time," or "Well, this person of this family member who went missing was working in the castle." So it was all very like hearsay. Um, but the testimonies were pretty gruesome and relatively detailed. Um, Most of the time, again, content warning. Um, they included things like severe beatings, burning. There was a lot of mutilation of the hands, and biting of the flesh from faces, arms, and other body parts.
Gross.
Like cannibalistic almost? Oh,
Yeah, yeah. There was a
I
lot of
don't
stories of Elizabeth being a cannibal. A lot of
Wow.
accusations. Yeah. There was a lot of throwing people outside naked and letting them freeze to death or starve to death. The use of needles was mentioned a fair amount. This is thought because they would like prick people to bleed them. There's you're gonna love this one. There's a particularly gruesome account in which it involves biting the boob off of a girl, forcing her to then cook and eat it. So they literally like bit the boob off of this girl and then made that girl cook and eat her own boob.
Ew.
Yeah. Hopefully she was not well endowed.
I'm sure that tasted disgusting too. It's just a sack of fat.
Yeah, I'm sure it was gross. And there's another particularly bad one where they would strip somebody naked, cover them in honey, and then tie them down and let them be eaten by insects.
And was it Egyptian or was it Emperor Nero? But that was done elsewhere too. That's a thing.
Yeah.
I would believe Nero did it. He was fucked up too. Just
Oh yeah, he made Christian candles. That was essentially set a Christian on fire.
Yeah.
Christian candles.
For when you have that annoying Christian in your life.
But you can't get rid of your annoying Christian. You have to keep them around so that they can ward off fairies.
You guys.
That's fair. That's actually valid.
You're annoying Christian?
Yeah.
Oh, man. And here I thought being a god charm was a good thing.
I mean, it is.
Now I'm sad.
You have to go on vacation with me every time because
I can put up with being the annoying Christian for that.
yeah, you know.
Take me with you.
Oh boy.
Oh, we're
So
getting to the good
vampires.
part.
Yes, so vampires. We are getting towards the good part. So,
After all that.
well, yeah, I guess the torture testimonies are probably the best part. The rest of it's like, you know. So Terzo contacted her son named Paul and her son-in-laws and was like, "Yo, this ain't cool." Like, and they were like, "Yeah, ooh, you right. Uh, we should do something about this." So they made a plan to arrest her and send her off to a nunnery and then divide up her estates. In a letter to Terzo's wife, he wrote that his unannounced arrival at the castle found one girl dead and another in the castle as living prey. She was eating dinner at the time of his arrival, though it is commonly believed that Terzo found her, like caught her red-handed. It's not true. She was just eating dinner. I don't know what she was eating. I guess it could have been a person. But
Who knows?
yeah. So they basically had all of these witness statements, and they had the four like most prominent like accomplices that she had, um, all of which actually confessed, but they only confessed under torture. Um, so
Which
that's a little
we know now
suspicious,
shouldn't be believed.
Yeah.
right?
Can't believe a torture confession.
Right. So they only confessed under torture. They never had any solid proof. Like there was never any evidence presented at the trial. And these accomplices that they had, even though they were like king's witnesses in this, they were like immediately executed upon admission. So like that was a little fishy too, and it was like super suspicious. That coupled with the fact that they had literally zero hard evidence. And they said that they found a book with all of the names of her victims written in it, but that book has never actually been found anywhere and was
I
never
find that
presented.
suspicious anyway. Like,
Yeah.
she is one of the most important nobles in all the country. Why would she keep a list of peasant names?
It's a very serial killer thing to do. Not that they knew that at the time,
Right,
but
but
The other reason could be so like when she would take the peasants, it was her taking them in as like people to work on her staff. So she would like give the peasants like a better life, which is why their families wouldn't necessarily notice that they went missing because they just go to work at the palace and they don't really ever hear from them again, which is kind of also leads into the whole like that's kind of what she did with the noble families when she opened up the school, was that like she took them in, so like not hearing from a family member for 5 years sounds weird to us, but I mean it's the 1600s, so
yeah,
I'm
but
just saying that's
but
I'm just
a lot
saying.
of the there's actually a lot of speculation too that these accusations were born from the fact that she was also treating her epilepsy into adulthood. So
True.
like there was people going missing and things like that, but it was for the treatment of her epilepsy rather than like just brutal murder. But not gonna lie, she probs a murderer. But anyway, so there were a lot of things about this trial that were just not handled well or handled strangely, especially because there were no written accounts of complaints against her. And in this time period when this took place, it was very, very commonplace. Like any formal complaint that anybody made was written. So even if it was like, yo, Frank stole my chicken, there was a written formal letter of complaint. and there was nothing against her. And a lot of so like the people of her immediate area weren't super fond of her, mostly because there was rumors of her being a crazy person. But a lot of people, like, she founded a hospital and she took care of all of these people's medical care, and she was known for like finding like peasant children or whatever who like didn't have parents and like adopting them in. Other people are saying, well, she did that so that she could kill them.
Yeah.
But but her trial was just a little weird. Even for the time, it was a little weird. So they like tried her accomplices really, really quickly, then executed them. Um, but Elizabeth was still like one of the most prominent nobles in the country. Um, like the king owed her a small fortune. She owned a third of the country. Like there's all of these things going on, and they didn't want her children's legacy to be super affected by what was going on. So they were like, here's what we'll do. We'll just not have a trial for her. Seems easy, right? We'll just we'll just put her in her castle. She can live there. Everybody else can get her stuff. Seems like a win-win. Um so after the like trial that she had, she was placed on house arrest. And the accounts of this vary a little bit to she had free reign of her castle as a whole, all the way up to she was literally bricked into one room.
That's the one I know.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so it kind of just depends on the way that you looked at the story. It is probably like from a historian standpoint, the fact that she did in fact have free reign of her castle, but it's way more dramatic to say that she was literally bricked into a room.
Yeah.
So she lived out the rest of her days in her castle, which admittedly were not very long because she died a few years later. Um, she The way that she died was actually really anticlimactic in that she told her guard, like, she complained of having cold hands, and then her guard said, it's nothing but damn, just go lay down, and then they found her dead in the morning. And that's
Oh,
like
I
the
thought she went on like a hunger strike.
only information that they have about her actual death is that she complained of having cold hands, and then she was dead the next morning.
Weird.
Yeah. A lot of people think that the entire thing was sort of set up by her son-in-laws and Terzo to acquire her lands, because a tremendous amount of those lands went to Terzo. So they were like, that's a little suspicious
Yeah.
too.
See, I'm on team that, because I don't care who the fuck you are. If you are accused of killing 300 people and found guilty, you ain't going under house arrest. I don't care if you're the fucking king of England.
I mean, in
Yeah.
that time period, you 100% are just going on house arrest.
Yeah.
Maybe
I'm
not today,
on that boat
but
too, mainly because a woman to have that kind of power out, like even in England, 'cause during that time Queen Elizabeth I was reigning, and even then, like, there was this thought that a woman can't have power, they can't rule, they can't do anything like that, and they're often seen as threats. And that's why a lot of women were accused of being witches and killed, because they had some sort of power that men couldn't handle or were jealous of. So I think for the time period, it's more likely that she was set up. I'm not saying she's innocent of everything, I don't know, but it's probably more likely that she was set up, and the stories
were exaggerated.
Yeah, there's probably some truth in those stories. I don't know what they would be. I don't think that she was just taking peasants in and they just happened to die, and then people are like, oh god, cannibalism. But
Yeah.
and
There's a lot of like blaming it on like cholera too.
oh yeah,
Yeah. Well, and to the point, the treatments that they had for epilepsy were pretty gruesome. So it is entirely possible that
Yeah. And I mean, you're going to bleed somebody, which could also be this whole book, you know, you want to keep track of like who you've actually like bled or
right,
whatever, or, you know, like, because I mean, if we've never seen the book, we don't know what names are written in there. So it could just be like an account of people that they have taken blood from, or, you know, like
right.
I said, you know,
Well,
people
and
that he just took in for whatever
nobody
reason.
has ever found the book. The book was never presented in any of the trials. There's literally zero evidence that the book ever existed.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's too fishy.
yeah, I mean it is
Way
it is
too
super
fishy.
fishy, but also like there was a lot of weird shit that happened under her watch. Cuz like the girls going missing from the school is an actual thing. So like cuz that's what led to her arrest in the first place. Like she made that mistake. So
True.
it was kind of like they like as much as Terzo and her son-in-laws might have wanted to accuse her, she had to have made some mistake somewhere. So my guess is that it was probably some mixture of both accounts.
Yeah, because like her being noble, you don't think that she would turn on noble girls because she would know they'd be mixed. Like hands down, that's the best way to get caught.
Yeah, a lot of the stories about it were at that point she had lost all reason. Like it was solely about
She spiraled out of control.
maintaining her beauty and her youth because she still wasn't remarried. And so
Yeah.
it was a lot about like she had lost all reason at that point, and it was just about the thrill of the kill sort of thing,
Yeah, I think
which
I read somewhere, it might be one of the other. So when I originally learned about Elizabeth Bathory, it led me on this huge deep dive, and I will never again, sorry for any Elizabeths, trust anyone named fucking Elizabeth, because all of the most prolific female serial killers are all named Elizabeth. Like the people, no, I'm not even joking. Like the top three are all three named Elizabeth, and they have like a kill count of over 100. Like they're, I don't know what it is about Elizabeths, but
it just
I
be
want to
crazy.
say that it. I mean, it could have been one of the other ones, but I think there was also rumors that she might have suffered from syphilis, which is why she did a lot of
Mm.
really weird and crazy things, and wouldn't have been like of sound mind to be like, oh, I shouldn't kill noble people.
Well, syphilis doesn't usually affect the mind in women, but the treatment does.
Yeah, so I don't. All I know is that syphilis eats away at your brain, and it does some fucked up shit to you.
For
That's
men,
interesting.
it actually
Yeah.
doesn't, if I remember correctly, it doesn't mess with a female's brain so much, but the treatment is mercury, which will definitely screw up your brain.
Yeah.
I don't know. I did not see anything like in any of my research that
I mean, could have been one
suggested
of the
that.
other Elizabeths. I don't. There
Yeah,
was
I was
like
gonna say that
If she
suggested
was,
that she had syphilis, but
if she was eating people and she got that one disease that you get from eating people, that could have been the reason why she spiraled out of control too. Because doesn't that make you go a little crazy?
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Which is
So,
why most people who are cannibals don't survive very long.
well,
yeah.
yeah, we can't. Humans can't
Mm-hmm.
human meat forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So whether or not you believe that Elizabeth Bathory was in fact a psychopath
That's
serial
about that.
killer, she is still listed as one of the most famous vampires in history.
Ugh, I'm really creeped out.
You're
Just
welcome.
wait.
Yeah.
Because I
The
know who.
other vampire that everybody knows about,
Dracula! I
yeah,
mean,
Blah.
is Dracula, based off of the famous Vlad the Impaler, who is actually named Vlad Tepes. Um, well, kind of actually named that. It's complicated. I'll get into it.
yeah, it's
It's
Interesting little
complicated.
tidbit though. Um, Elizabeth's cousin was the Prince of Transylvania, which means that she has direct blood ties to Vlad.
but Vlad
Yeah.
was aft. I don't remember what
He
time
was
period
way
it was.
before her.
Was
Oh,
he
was he
like
before?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
the
he was
1000s?
almost
10 years, is that right?
no, he's not quite that much. He was almost 100 years before her.
Oh, okay. I thought he
Um,
came after her.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
No, so Vlad the Third was born in 1431 in Transylvania. Um, Interestingly enough, like everybody associates him with Transylvania because of Dracula. He was probably born there, but literally never lived there. Like immediately was moved somewhere else, never owned property in Transylvania, never like had anything to do with Transylvania ever.
I
The
did not know
castle
that.
that is commonly known as like Dracula's Castle, that's like the tourist attraction. They literally picked it because it was on a hill and very creepy.
It was for sale recently too, like in the last decade or something. They had it for sale. No
Why
one would
didn't
buy
we
it.
buy it, guys?
Yeah, why
No one
did
would buy it.
we could have filmed this episode there?
We should totally do some travel episodes
That would be
when
super fun.
when we can someday. Tell creepy stories and creepy locations.
That would be super awesome. I would 100%
Just saying.
do that. Yeah, when our YouTube following gets big enough and we can afford to do that.
Support us.
Groupon has really cheap trips if you trust it.
As long as we're not going on a cruise. That's all.
Oh, that's
all
I love cruises.
No.
I do. Well, I think I do too. I wouldn't actually know because mine got canceled. Thanks, Corona.
Terrifying. No.
Anyway, so Vlad
Vampire.
III was born in 1431 in Transylvania. He is actually an illegitimate son. So he is the illegitimate son of Vlad II. Vlad II was the same year that Vlad III was born. Vlad II was initiated into an order of knights called the Order of the Dragon. And he was issued a new surname when this happened, and his new surname was Dracul. So he became Vlad Dracul.
Oh, okay.
So his son, Vlad III, will later be known as the son of Dracul or Dracula.
Okay, that's where that comes from. Huh.
Yeah. But like his real actual name was Vlad Tepes. Before
Still
his
a cool
father
name.
before his father had his name changed. Fun little fact, the Drac in Dracul stands for devil or dragon. It has two meanings.
Creepy.
So the Order of the Dragon was super determined and devoted to one cause, and that was fuck the Ottomans.
I feel so bad for the Ottomans, but then I have to remember history, and I'm like, they weren't like the good guys either.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, it's a little. So, they lived in this little area that was situated between most of Christian Europe and then the Muslim lands of the Ottoman Empire. So Vlad II's, and eventually Vlad III's home was the Principality of Wallachia, which was frequently the scene of a lot of like bloody battles that happened between the two forces.
Crusades.
Yeah, it was not great. It was great. So Vlad the Elder was called to a diplomatic meeting in 1442 with a Ottoman sultan named Murad II, and he brought both of his sons. Interestingly enough, he left the important son, the legitimate son, and he took with him his two illegitimate sons.
Well, because if they wound up all getting slaughtered, then the legitimate son is still there.
Yeah, I guess that's part of it. It's really funny though because that plan backfired.
Wait, did the opposite happen? Did they all live and the legitimate son die?
Kind of. So he brought his sons with him, Vlad III, and then his second son, Radu. But the meeting was a trap and they were all taken hostage. And the elder Vlad was released under the condition that he leave his sons behind in order to ensure that he, like, quote, behave himself. So it was like a kind of like a, hey, we're going to keep your sons, and you can go do things over there, but, like, don't fuck with us because we'll just kill your sons.
Like what China did to Korea forever.
Sure.
Yeah.
I was going to use the common reference of Game of Thrones, in which they do that all the time. like
I don't know
Theon
that
is
game.
literally the ward of Ed
Yeah.
Stark.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
That
so
news
that
monkey.
so that Theon's father like doesn't be a little bitch. But but anyway. So under the Ottomans' rule, Vlad and his younger brother were tutored in the sciences and philosophy and the arts, and he learned how to become a skilled horseman and a warrior. And it, like in general, they were treated very well. His younger brother, Radu, whose name I'm probably mispronouncing, was like, "Dude, this is so cush," and Vlad was like, "Yeah, but like these bitches piss me off." He was like, "Yeah, like we've been treated nice and everything, but like, you know, whatever, fuck these dudes. That's not my real home. You're not my real dad."
Like Korea to China.
Yeah. Um so while all of this was going on and they were being tutored to be proper young gentlemen, Vlad's father was fighting to keep his political position in Wallachia. I'm going to mispronounce it, but it's the voivode, which is kind of like the highest ranking nobleman or like king, but it's not, you're not like actually king. So he was fighting to keep this position, but he failed, and in 1447 he was kicked to the curb by a local nobleman who, like, their system is weird, so they're not actually called noblemen there, they're called boyars. But Vladislav II kicked out regular Vlad, and they yeah, there's a lot of Vlads here. So it's about to get a lot less Vlads though, because they kicked out our Vlad's dad, and then they killed him in the swamps near Beltany, Baltany. Um, so they also killed our Vlad's older half brother, the legitimate one, whose name was like Mircea, something
I
along
was
those
gonna say
lines.
legitimate Vlad.
So we got Daddy Vlad, legitimate Vlad, and Vlad.
Grandpa
Yeah.
Vlad.
Yeah.
And baby Vlad.
A little bit, yeah. So his plan backfired because he was like, I'm going to take my illegitimate son so that if we get killed, I'll still have my legitimate son. And he left his legitimate son, but then him and his legitimate son got murdered. So, and now
Damn
his
that karma.
illegitimate sons are like, life is good
The
with the
plan was sound going in.
So, our Vlad learned about this. He was like, whoa. Fuck this. I'm going to take back what's mine. So, good Vlad, because, you know, we like our man Vlad. He's
Baby
like,
Vlad.
he's like, I got all these Ottomans. If I can convince them to help me attack while Vladislav is gone, I'm going to have a better chance of winning. So Vlad, good Vlad, our Vlad, baby Vlad, convinced the Ottoman governors of several cities in northern Bulgaria to join him while Bad Vlad was gone fighting in the Balkans. So Vlad, our Vlad, he was like,
A battle of the Vlad.
yeah, the Battle of the Vlads. He took back his father's seat. He was like, this is my throne now. He was like, you were over there in the Balkans. This is my chair. It was really, really great for like 2 months. And then other Vlad came home.
There's so many Vlads.
yeah. Yeah. So at this point, Vlad the Elder and his legitimate son are dead.
Okay.
Our Vlad the Impaler, he's still alive. He's taken back his father's seat. And bad Vladislav?
How can we not call Vlad the Impaler as bad Vlad?
He's the one you guys keep calling good Vlad, baby Vlad.
Yeah, he's the good Vlad.
In this story, I guess.
Yeah. So, good Vlad won Wallachia, and it was great for about 2 months. Then bad Vladislav came home, and he was like, GTFO. And good Vlad was like, all right, I'll leave, I'll go, but I don't like it. So we don't actually like distinctly know what happened to him from now being 1448 to 1456.
I was about to say,
Um,
wow, we jumped way.
yeah, so there's not a whole lot that is recorded there, and there's not a whole lot like significant that happens, other than two things. Well, three things. So we do know that he gives up his ties with the Ottomans and he joins Hungary's side in the war. He at some point goes through an epic training montage, and then
Gotta have a montage.
in 1453, Constantinople fell, which was a huge deal because that was one of the last major strongholds against the Ottomans, against the entirety of Christian Europe. So they were like, "Oh shit, the Ottomans are going to take over everything." So
And
yeah,
that's when it became Istanbul, and then they go back to Constantinople when the Christians take it back over and shit.
yeah.
This song's in my head
So
now.
so
Good for the
the
Pope.
Hungarians were like, shit. What do we do? So then Vlad, who is like, I've been loyal to you guys for like a while, and I do soldiery things, so like you could just name me Voivode of Wallachia, like my dad was, and everything will be great. So they do. They're like, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do it.
So did they oust Bad Vlad?
Yeah, Bad Vlad got ousted.
See ya, Bad Vlad.
Yeah, I don't actually know where he went, but at some point in that time period, they were like, he's not relevant anymore.
He was like, I got what I wanted. Deuces.
Yeah. So in 1453, Constantinople fell, and then in 1456, our Vlad the Impaler, was named Voivode of Wallachia. So this is where things start to get spicy, because this is where Vlad's like, I have powers. So first thing that our dear old Vlad does with his newfound power is stop paying the annual tribute to the Ottoman Sultan.
Take that, Ottomans.
Right. He was like,
tax.
guys.
I'm on his side for that one.
Right. He was like, guys, hear me out. If we keep paying them, we can't beat them. And everybody else was like, yeah, that's so smart. Why didn't we think of that? So he had just made a very bold move with his newfound power as Voivode of Wallachia. And he knew that like his father had been betrayed by these boyars before. They were a little unsettled by his presence because he wasn't like born and raised in Wallachia. There's just a lot of issues there. So he's like, my power is not going to be solidified here unless I do something to end the incessant conflicts that were known to take place between Wllachia's boyars. So he was like, I have a good idea. And according to legend, there's some speculation on how accurate this is, but according to legend, he invited hundreds of these boyars to a big banquet, particularly the ones that he knew had betrayed his father. And, because these were the problem children. And then he had them all stabbed. And while their bodies were still warm, he impaled them on spikes.
He went all red wedding.
Yeah, he did. He went a little red wedding. But the rest of the children, the boyars, were like, fuck, this guy is serious. So they stopped messing with shit, which got his point across. So then he's like really solidly like, this is my chair and y'all can fuck off. So stories of Vlad the Third began to circulate. And he became known as like he was super super great and helpful in the war effort, but like also a little bit of a wild card. So with the invention of the printing press, a lot of this information became a lot easier to circulate. So historians have found evidence of various like pamphlets, in different areas that tell the same tales, which leads them to believe that they are at least partially true. Because they're like, if these tales are completely made up, then they wouldn't have the exact same recountings in all of these different areas. Um, and it's specifically worth noting that a lot of these pamphlets were not like they were supposed to be hostile towards Vlad. Like a lot of them were from the Ottomans or from people that like he had offended, and at this point, like the Hungarians were like, we might have whoopsied because he just murdered a lot of people. So, um, they were intentionally trying to paint him as a villain, so it is possible that they were embellished, but at least part of it has to be true because of like the vast differences in the areas that these stories were told and like printed. There wasn't any way that they like could have been entirely made up and all told the same way.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. So there is a number of pretty gruesome tales during Vlad's rule. Content warning. It's gonna get gross. He was credited for impaling dozens of Saxon merchants who were once allied with the boyars that he impaled earlier. So that was like the same year. He was like, "Oh, you guys were friends with those guys? Yeah." And he just offed those people too. Um, Around the same time, there's a group of Ottoman envoys that visited him, and he essentially, like, very politely told them to remove their turbans, and they very politely declined, saying that they were for religious purposes. And he's like,
Notice.
"Well, I commend you for your religious devotion. Let me help. You can never take them off again." And he literally nailed them to the skulls of those envoys.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
That's not where I thought this was going.
Yeah. He was like, you know what, you guys, that's fair. That's very righteous of you. Here, let me just nail that in, and then you'll never have to worry about it falling off.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Wow.
In 1459, he had an entire village of German settlers killed when there was a trade dispute. So there's like this little dispute that caused some issues, and he was like, you know what? Just burn them all of them, children, women, all of them, burn them,
Jesus.
burned the whole village. Let's see. In 1462, this is we talked about this a little bit earlier. This is the forest of the impaled. Um, so he had hundreds of prisoners of war that he had captured when he raided the southern banks of the Danube River. I think that's how it's pronounced. But anyway, so he had like hundreds of these prisoners of war, and he literally impaled them on spikes, and it was like from recounts, the numbers were in the thousands.
Jesus.
And it like he spared no one. There is stories of infants being impaled on the same spikes as their mothers. There is different ways that you could impale people.
I know this.
Yeah, I was gonna say
How many different ways can you impale somebody?
he was very fond of two different ways. We're not actually like Vlad the Impaler has little to nothing to do with actual vampires.
That's true. He was just somewhat of an inspiration.
Yeah.
I think it's just
So
the name.
2 ways of torture. That's what we were talking about.
right. So the Forest of the Impaled. So there were two ways that Vlad was particularly fond of impaling people. One, the idea is that you would literally go through the anus, impale them all the way up, and the spike would come out of their mouth hole. That
Okay,
was
I
like a
know,
perfect impaling.
I know that that's a thing that existed, but for some reason, you just literally gave me human bumps. I don't.
You're welcome. The second way of impaling people is a lot less gruesome and awful, and really just kind of it deals with like putting it through the stomach and then like out their back, or like through the chest and then out their back. They would
Okay,
use
so like,
this way a lot when they wanted people to live for a while on the spike.
Fun
hmm.
story. So there's this show I saw that was all about torture in medieval times, and they did the medical and science behind the torture themselves, and like explain like this is how it would work and this is what it would do to your body. They did one on Vlad's impaling, and they found that there is a way to impale through the anus and keep somebody alive for about 3 days, and they think that perhaps Vlad got so good at his impaling that he may have also figured out how to do this. The angle of the point and the length of the point have to be very specific. And you go through the anus and you have to do it very, very slowly, because that point will push the organs aside and not pierce them. And it comes up through the chest cavity, and you actually come out past the collarbone. You don't come out through the mouth. You come out like this way so you don't hit the veins. And someone can live for days. How horrifying you do.
That is actually, I was gonna say that is actually true. And
They had a whole like diagram, like where you could see like the inside of a person, and they like
I was gonna say,
animated.
and it specifically mentioned that he was known for impaling people on spikes that were not particularly sharp for that reason.
Because he wanted them to be alive, and then you could still theoretically talk.
I mean, if
We
you were
figured
like
out.
passing out from the pain and such.
Oh.
There is another pretty insane recounting of him taking prisoners of war and then cutting off various body parts and mailing them to other leaders as a warning.
That's awful.
Not where I thought this was going. Okay, that's
Yeah. So he would cut off like ears and noses and genitals and heads.
Imagine being that leader and you get a box of noses and you're just like, who do these belong to?
Yeah, so like there is a period of time after all of this brutality occurs in which he like loses his title and becomes a prisoner. And I don't really know a ton of like what happened to him in this time frame.
Who does he become a prisoner to? The Ottomans?
So it seems to vary because Hungary is like you sir are a problem.
No shit.
We've literally created a monster, but also you're very good at killing the Ottomans. So it seems like it kind of just depends. Like he's a prisoner of the Ottomans for a little while, but he's also in exile because the king of Hungary was like, get the fuck out of that seat. So then he's a prisoner of Hungary for a little while. But eventually he earns back his seat as like ruler of Wallachia, but it's very, very short lived because he's killed in combat like less than a year later.
Wow. That's a very anticlimactic way to go out.
I mean, it is a little bit, but like it was a pretty epic battle. And there is like a part of
Did
his
he get
story.
impaled on a sword? Because at least there'd be some karma in that.
It kind of, there is actually some like some people that say that his body was like taken and beheaded and then impaled on a spike, like his head was put on a spike in like a sultan's, like an Ottoman sultan's like house basically as a trophy. Yeah. It's a little gross. But like he is widely renowned as like a hero of Wallachia and is still today looked back as a national hero because he defended what is now Romania against the Ottomans for so long, and he was often recounted as like the last stand or the last hope against the Ottomans invading
Huh,
Christian Europe.
weird.
Yeah, and so there is a story about him and his younger brother who remained loyal to the Ottomans. And there's like a big battle there, and he beats his younger brother, and um, so like there's a lot of stories about how he fought back and he defeated the Ottomans. So as much as we know the gruesome tales of Vlad the Impaler, he is renowned as like a national hero, and it's kind of like if somebody took a story of George Washington from the US and then like demonized George Washington, which
People would lose their shit.
right, I was going to say Americans would be like what the fuck, dude.
Well,
But
that's happening to some of the founding fathers right now.
that is
So.
true.
True, true,
But
true.
that's kind of what we did to Vlad, to these like he is supposed to be like a national hero that defended their country against the Ottoman invasion. So I just thought that that was really neat.
His
A lot of
reputation preceded him.
yeah, I was gonna say a lot of the villainization of Vlad comes from the fact that a lot of people say that Count Dracula is based off of Vlad. Bram Stoker himself said that that's not true, but it's
Oh,
totes
I didn't
true.
know that.
Yeah, he was like, no, he's totally not based off of Vlad, but also he was totally based off of Vlad.
He tried to play it off cool and just could not.
Yeah,
No, I
yeah,
just thought of this all myself.
right. Yeah, no,
He's
he's
no Mary Shelley.
yeah, he was definitely based off of Vlad, but um,
Side note, Mary Shelley is in one of the Jodie Whittaker Doctor Who episodes. Inside note.
I need to see it.
I thought like you're going. Sorry, continue.
that's mostly that's what I have about Vlad the Impaler. His life has little to nothing to do with vampirism.
Yeah, you
Um,
think where did they get it from? I mean,
The
the same.
name.
the fact that Vlad Dracula and Dracula the character is based off of Vlad Dracula.
Yeah.
That's literally it. And he was known for being gruesome and like kind of aggressive, you know.
I'm kind of disappointed in
Yeah.
the inspiration. Like,
Yeah, I know. I as I was
you have so
researching
many
it,
better tales.
I know as I was researching it, I was like, oh my gosh, like he has literally nothing to do with vampirism, but like he was a god of impaling things.
He perfected it.
Yeah. And so in my brain, I was like, how is he the most well-known vampire in history? But Elizabeth Bathory, who literally drank human blood.
Allegedly. But I mean, I guess if you
No,
put it on your lips and drink, yeah.
well, I was gonna say,
Epilepsy
and
cure.
she crushed up skulls and drank that, and that's like actual, yeah,
Gross.
it is really gross. But she like literally drank human blood. But
History's funny like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting. Vampires in general are is super cool. There's so much information that I had no idea about. And like in going through it, there's so much more that like I'm buying a textbook on Slavic vampirism.
That's awesome.
Yeah, because my friend sent me a little excerpt from one of the chapters that was about hunting vampires, which is where I learned that the Romani tribe had like the twins with their clothes inside out on a Saturday thing. That was from that textbook. But I was
Well,
like,
find
I'm
out
buying
what
this
day you
textbook.
were born on.
This is important. Let me
Yeah.
let
We
me
gotta know.
to the calendar. Let's see. Going the wrong direction.
Drumroll.
All right.
You could just probably Google what day is.
I probably could, but here we go. I was born on a Monday.
Ah, so
Oh,
close.
Not a Saturday. So
bad
sorry.
day.
I was born on a Monday.
Lame.
I know, it is actually a little lame. I'm a little disappointed.
So is that all you got?
That's all I got. That's what I got about Vlad the Impaler and Elizabeth Bathory and vampires and Slavic culture. There's literally so much more though. Like so much more. So if you're interested in it, look it up, do some research because it's really neat. I think I found a newfound passion of mine, and that's
Slavic
researching
vampires?
vampires. Yeah, specifically like folkloric vampires. There's a huge difference between fiction and folkloric, and that is important to note. So a lot of like the inspirations that we know for vampires came from Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is a fiction vampire.
Hmm.
Though there is some like the idea that this shape shifting probably came from the Lugat, and the fact that he couldn't see his reflection was probably influenced by the fact that vampires were notoriously invisible. Things like that. So there is probably some semblance of truth, kind of. But a lot of it were things that he just kind of made up, like vampires hating the cross. It's like not ever a thing.
And like holy water and stuff, yeah.
Yeah. Interestingly, one of the things that I thought was true was vampires crossing water, because it like Dracula can't cross moving water, and so like I thought that was a thing that was like actually a vampire thing, and I found zero evidence of it. So
Yeah,
It is a fairy thing.
Yeah, in the
I wonder if
Netflix,
that's related.
in
Like
the
how
Netflix miniseries
Stoker
for
came up.
Dracula, he gets around that by traveling on a boat and by having like 50,000 crates. It's not 50,000. It's a lot of crates of Transylvanian soil that he can rest in and be on. And so like the bed in the cabin that he stays in is just filled with the dirt so that he can stay on it.
Weird.
Yeah.
That's how he
So-
travels from Transylvania to America.
Ah,
Or to, it might have been like England. I don't remember where he got.
Wherever he traveled to.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
binged it in literally a day. And then it was off of Netflix. And I was like, okay.
Oh, speaking of Netflix, neither one of these movies are actually on Netflix. But there are two movies about Elizabeth Bathory, if you're interested in learning more about her. They both are like dramatized historic films, so they're not like actually accurate. And both of them, well, one of them kind of depicts her in the light of like she was definitely killing people, and the other depicts her in the light of she was framed. So it's kind of interesting. I watched both of them as I was doing this research. They're on Amazon Prime, so you can go watch them. But one is called The Countess, and the other was I think it's just called Bathory.
I think I've seen both of those.
Yeah, I was gonna say I watched them both. They're not like scary films or anything like that. They're just interesting.
They're still creepy. Like you can't talk about her without getting a little creeped out.
That's fair. The one that like frames her as being framed is not like creepy at all, I don't think. Because she's 100% innocent in that version of it, and they literally just took her shit because she was an intelligent, educated woman. The other one is a little bit creepy because she like beats this old lady, and then the old lady curses her, and that's why she starts smearing blood on her face. You should watch it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I love
And
it.
then, the one of them is like really weird because she has an affair with like a 20-year-old dude.
I mean, I can't say anything. If you learn about Catherine the Great, she was a nymphomaniac.
I enjoy Catherine the Great. So I was just listening to a small little biopic of her today.
I love
Which is why the name of the nobles that you said, that's the same name of the nobles in Russia. That's why I was like, wait a minute, I heard that name today. It was from that documentary.
The name of the boyars?
Yeah, that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I heard that today.
They're basically nobles, but they have a different title.
Right.
But it's fine
like,
because Vlad murders them all and impales them on spikes.
I mean, there's that.
So thanks for joining us on our discussion of vampires. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and we will do our best to answer them. And that's really, if you're interested in other vampire lore, go look at it. But there's so much more to Slavic vampire lore, so I highly recommend Slavic things, which is really great because E's episode next week.
Yeah, I'm gonna cover some Slavic folklore myself. We're gonna talk about witches. So we're gonna talk about the most infamous witch of all time, Baba fucking Yaga. And then we're gonna make like a jump across from the Eastern Europe to Japan. And I'm also going to talk about the Oni Baba.
Ooh, that'll be interesting, especially with Mulan coming out. I know Mulan's Chinese, but they had a witch in it, which is not at all a thing in Chinese culture. So I'm quite interested to hear about the witch type thing in Japanese culture.
Yeah, a little preview for it. When I was doing more research on Baba Yaga, one of the like suggestions of like related type characters, I guess, was the Oni Baba. And I started reading about them and I'm like, one, there's no comparison to Baba Yaga. Like, no offense to
Fact.
anyone, but she is her own entity. But also, the Oni Baba doesn't really have anything to do with her. I was like, I'm kind of disappointed. I thought it was going to be like the Japanese version, but it's definitely not. But I thought it was cool to cover the two Babas.
Well, I know of neither of them, so that'll be quite interesting.
You don't know
I don't.
Baba
I was just
Never
saying,
heard of it. No spoilers.
I don't know a ton about Baba Yaga, but when you said that she's like nobody can compare, it made me think of that scene from John Wick where they're like they call, oh shit, what do they call him? They call him something, and they're like, oh, like what is he, the boogeyman? And he's like, no, he's the one you call when you want to kill the boogeyman, or whatever they say. It's super dramatic, and I just love it. He's like,
I've never seen John Wick.
oh
That
my
did
gosh,
not make me want to see
you
it
should
either.
totally watch it. It's brilliant. I love it
Yeah.
so much.
See, when I talk about Baba Yaga, I immediately think of Ant-Man because there's a scene in the first Ant-Man movie when I don't even remember what they're talking about, but
I
then
never watched Ant-Man either.
the like
Oh,
Russian
it's
or
the same
Romani guy, he goes like Baba Yaga, and I'm like, I'm fucking done. Also, hold on, real quick, because I can't keep secrets. I'm gonna move this out, so excuse the camera. I want to show you guys my show and tell for next week. Hold on.
Can I keep this in the video?
You can keep it in the video. So my show and tell for next week, because I have show and tell, is a book on Russian fairy tales. And I'll go into more detail about it in it, but there is about 600 fairy tales in this book.
excellent.
I love fairy tales.
And the man who wrote this book, his name is, I'm gonna butcher it. It's Alexander Afanasyev. I don't know how to pronounce the last name, but he is called the Russian Brother Grimm.
Oh,
Ooh, is that
excellent.
actually for next week or is that for November?
No, this is for next week.
Interesting, because in November we're going to cover some Grimm tales.
No, I thought we were going to do childhood stories.
Exactly, the Grimm.
Oh, no, mine's definitely not Grimm.
Mine's technically Grimm, but I also have the Color Fairy book version. So.
Yeah, mine for November is definitely going to be from Ancient Sumeria. So hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge to anyone who knows what I'm talking about.
Not me.
I have not been formally invited for next month, but I think I know what I would do.
I am formally extending the invitation. I just don't know the calendar.
That's totally fine.
Guess
I
need
shall
to do that.
I shall start preparing.
Yeah, so I'm doing a comparison between the 12 Dancing Princesses as we know it and the Grimm version, which is really fucked up. Iron shoes that burn your feet while you dance, sort of fucked up.
Mine is going to be the Ancient Sumerian tale of how I got my name Enkidu. So
Because we have to know. Oh, I remember it. I remember the name. I'll cut this part out because I don't want to spoil it. But I remember
Yeah,
Um,
that part you can cut out, but definitely you can leave in the little teaser about ancient Sumerian because
I will do.
unless you know the story, which I guess since we're gonna cut this part out, Victoria, it's the Epic of Gilgamesh is what I'm gonna cover.
No, that's what I wanted to do.
No, no, it's mine, and it's gonna have to be a two-parter because it's so fucking long.
Well, now you have to find another children's tale. I think we're trying to stay away from Disney because we did Disney.
What about the ugly duckling?
It's so sad.
But that's not a fucked up story.
I mean, it literally is.
No.
Yeah.
It's like a bunch of other ducks are like, "Hey, you're fucking ugly," and he's like,
But that's
"Oh,
not fucked up. It's just bullying, and then he finds
bullying
his
is
people.
fucked up."
I mean, true, but we're talking like
Yeah, it's not our level of fucked up.
Yeah,
It's okay.
like my story involves girls who have been cursed to dance before like a devil or something in iron shoes that are red hot that burn their feet constantly all night.
I think I did know that. I remember that.
Yeah.
I'll have to think of one.
A little more fucked up than just bullying.
Yeah.
Pure torture. But
Gilgamesh is not going to be as fucked up content warning wise as like my episode next week and Hercules was. But the most tame story that I will do is in December for my Christmas.
I can't wait to do St.
My
Nicholas.
Christmas story is gonna be bad.
What is your Christmas story?
I think I'm gonna do like Krampus.
Okay, good. I wanted to confirm that it wasn't mine because I'm keeping mine a secret because it's the least Christmas story I could find.
I kind of want us to cover, because I feel like we're going to have an extra day, but maybe we'll take a week off for Christmas. But we've got to hit that German one mentioned in The Office someday.
Hit what?
There's a German. Oh my gosh, he like whips boys, and have you not seen The Office?
Not
No?
all of it. I've seen.
Dwight. I'm googling it. Dwight celebrates this German. The Office German.
It like
Santa.
goes along with why they have like the pickle thing.
That goes along with the pickle.
Yeah.
Belschnickel.
Yeah.
It's Belschnickel.
Because I think he would like pickle people. And that's where the whole like
St. Nicholas saved children from being pickled.
oh, is that what it was? Maybe
I mean, like they were chopped up and pickled, and then he brought them back.
yeah.
No, but it's like Belschnickel, there's like whipping, and I think there's slave children, and I don't remember, but it's called Belschnickel. I'm just saying. But anyway,
I need to come up with something for next month because
What's a fairy tale that you read as a child? That's kind of what we're doing. Or
hold on. Let me finish this outro so I can stop the recording and download this before everybody logs off.
oh, that's
I
fair.
thought we finished it.
It was kind of half finished.
Oh.
Like we had the outro, and then it went to you for preview, and then we just went off tangent.
Yeah, that's fair.
So we just need to do our shout out for Facebook and everything. So whoever I'm
Oh, fuck. What's our hold on, because the only one I care about is the Instagram and Facebook group. Hold on.
and YouTube. Don't forget YouTube.
Oh yeah, and YouTube. Well, it's gonna be on. Yeah.
But it's also in the podcast to do YouTube and Spotify.
Yeah. All right. I don't remember what our Spotify log. Hold
I
on.
don't remember anything.
I have it written down on one of my. I don't know if I remember which Google document it's under. Maybe.
But, well, while she's looking that up, you can choose like a favorite fairy. Like if there's a children's story you liked when you were a kid, and maybe you found out the screwed up origins of it, like how we all sang "Ring Around the Rosie," and then we're like, "Oh shit, it's plague."
Yeah, I don't know if I have anything like that though.
Should I pull out my Grim? Grim, what'd you do?
Oh, here we go. Okay, I found it. All right.
I can't get to it easily.
So if you want to stay up to date on everything going on, you can follow us on social. Our Facebook group is Fucked Up Fables Without the U, FCKED, Up Fables. We also have an Instagram, which is at F_Fables. And our YouTube channel, if you want to see our lovely faces and our vampire. Well, I'm not so vampire. The other two are vampires. That is fucked up fables with an asterisk. So F asterisk CKED up fables. And then if you have any suggestions, you can send us a Gmail at fdup.fables@gmail.com.
That's all we have. Bye.
Bye.